It steals our attention, our time, our money, attitude, headspace. But what if God had more in mind for us? Let's talk about the thief of everything.
We've been talking about the ways that we can get caught up in what we can do to break free from comparison. As we kick off today, I want you to think for a second about this question. Who is somebody you look up to right now? We all have somebody that we look up to, someone that we idolize so much that we want to be just like them. In other words, we just compare. We are comparing ourselves to them. What do they have that we don't? What about them is something I like that I wish I had, right? Oftentimes, this is what we do with people that we look up to. We compare our lives to theirs. Now, let me clearly state, there's nothing wrong with looking up to somebody, being inspired by them, or even hoping to be like them one day. The problem comes when comparison shows up. When we make the switch from looking up to them and thinking that in order for us to be enough, we have to achieve what they've achieved, do what they do, or become just like them. The more we look at them, the worse we feel about ourselves. On our own, you feel okay about who you are and the way that your life looks. But as soon as you compare it to that part of your life to their part of their life, you suddenly feel like you're not enough. We're so caught up in comparison with them that it changes the way that we see us. It becomes the thief of self-esteem, self-worth, and confidence. The question is, how do we break out of this cycle of never feeling like we're enough? To help us with this, we're going to look at something that a guy named Paul, a leader in the early Christian church, wrote thousands of years ago. The people that he wrote to in this particular letter were dealing with temptation and comparing themselves to people around them, especially people who didn't have faith in Jesus Christ like they did. It reads, "Do not copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way that you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect." Paul told them right away not to copy the people around them, but Paul didn't stop there. He's not just talking about good things to do. Stop copying and comparing others. He's talking about a new way of thinking. He put a lot of focus on you. It's a shift in focus to go from comparing yourself to them to allowing God to transform you. When you and I start to understand what God says about us and how He sees us, it has the potential to change everything. When the old thinking is replaced by new thinking, it takes focus off of someone else's life and moves us towards who God created us to be. This is how we break the cycle of comparison and never thinking that we're enough. But I want you to think about a few key words that Paul uses between talking about them and talking about you. But let God transform you. This means choose to see yourself the way that God sees you, right? So when we do this, this is what it's like when we choose to compare ourselves to others. It's taking a focus. We focus on this other person's talents. We focus on their money, their looks, their popularity, their grades, their humor. We continue to compare ourselves to them and what they have. However, when we choose to see ourselves the way that God sees us, it's different. We focus on God's love for us, the worth that God assigns to us, how valuable God says we are, God's purpose for our lives, the gifts and talents that God has given us. These are so much more valuable and a better place for us to place our focus. And you can carry it with you all the time. A few verses later, Paul says this. "So since we find ourselves fashioned into all these excellently formed and marvelously functioning parts of the Christian body, let us go ahead and be what we were made to be without enviously or pridefully comparing ourselves with each other or trying to be something that we aren't." Paul's saying, just go ahead and be who you were created to be. The more we can focus on that, the more it'll change our thinking and eventually change us. See, believing this truth has the potential to help you break free from comparison and put the thief in lockdown. It also has the power to help you change your thinking into believing that you are enough. So, I know it's easy to say this, but let's actually apply two things that will help us. Identify what's not true. When you do this, you've got to ask yourself first, identify what's not true about myself. Ask God to help you see areas of your life where you're feeling like you're not enough. Also, think about some of the negative things that you think about yourself on a regular basis. Things like, I'm not attractive, popular, or smart enough. And ask God for help in taking those away. Second, replace old thoughts with new ones. Identify the negative thought and then come up with something positive to replace it with. Maybe something like, I'm a great friend, or I'm generous, or I'm really good at playing guitar. You can also replace your thoughts with truths about who God says you are. You can literally say things like, God says I'm loved. I'm a child of the true King. God considers me a friend, and He thinks I'm important. The Spirit of God lives inside of me. Whatever it is, pick something that celebrates who you are and who God made you to be. Let those new true thoughts help you break free from the cycle of comparison. This may not be easy at first. Ask God for help. You may have to find a place where you can write down these truths and say them out loud over and over again. Day one, they will sink in. Over time, you'll begin to see God open your eyes more and more to the amazing things about who you are and who He created you to be. And you'll begin to see through God's eyes that you are enough. Now listen, isn't this much more feeling of like less exhausting? It is, because you're seeing yourself through God's eyes. The Bible says that His yoke is light, that it's easy to carry. And that's because God sees you with so much worth. He sees you with so much value. And He loves you so much. So this week I want to challenge you not to compare yourselves to the things that this world says that we need. I want to challenge you to compare yourself to yourself, to see yourself through God's eyes, which is a child of God who is greatly loved. So head out into this week with that on your heart and on your mind. See you guys next week.
It steals our attention, our time, our money, attitude, headspace. Happiness. But what if God had more in mind for us? Let's talk about the thief of everything.